Welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio, the number one podcast for IT executives seeking insights on the impact and opportunities for innovation that automation is delivering to businesses around the world. Featuring thought leaders in AI, machine learning, orchestration, security automation, and the future of work. And now, on with the show. Welcome, everyone. Our guest today on Intelligent Automation Radio is Ian Barkin. Ian is the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Symphony Ventures, which is a leading global consulting, implementation, and managed services firm specializing in automation and artificial intelligence, two topics we're very keen on here. Ian's focus at Symphony Ventures is to design digital operations strategies for clients implementing global transformation efforts centered around these technologies. And we're really delighted to have Ian with us today. Ian, welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio.
Thanks, Guy. Delighted to be here.
So, Ian, as the Chief Strategy Officer for Symphony Ventures, you've described part of your job as enabling positive disruption for your clients with regards to AI, automation, the future of work, et cetera. And there's a lot of buzz about these topics today, so it can be very challenging to separate the wheat from the chaff. So for CIOs, CTOs, other IT executives listening, what do you recommend should be their first step on the journey towards digitally transforming their organization?
Oh, that's a great question. I often say that I spend a lot of my time storytelling, but much of it trying to be pragmatic and really, as you say, separate wheat from chaff. Just because there's a great deal of excitement, and I do not argue that some of the promise of the future is exciting. But I spend a lot of my time working with the C-suite to understand the art of the possible and what's enterprise grade today from a tool set perspective, so that some of the more interesting and esoteric promises of machine learning and AI, while very much on the roadmap, aren't necessarily the technologies that'll solve the problems that they have operationally today. And so I spend a lot of time with them on that. And then even more importantly, spend a lot of time on just the foundation, on just basically the education and alignment and change management and stakeholder management and communication plans within an organization, because you can have the best, shiniest, most capable technology in the world, but if the troops aren't aligned and clear what the destination is, you're not going to get there.
Right. I read also that you tell your clients there are 7 benefits to automation that Symphony Ventures identifies when working with them, and that you categorize them as cacheable or non-cacheable. The cacheable benefits are kind of obvious, I think, with regards to cost savings, but I think it would be very interesting for our audience if you talked about what the non-cacheable benefits are, which you've described as potentially orders of magnitude more impactful to an organization.
Certainly. This dates back really to the earliest days of our exploration with several different classes of automation tools. And obviously it's because, as you said, the cacheable components and really to cut right to it, the concept of headcount reduction that allows you to take cost out of an organization, that often is what gets projects funded. You need that in your ROI calculation and your business plan, but it's very primary, right? And so what we came across, and some of it was frankly a surprise and an exciting one at that, were these secondary and tertiary benefits. And so, as you say, we've described them as cacheable and non-cacheable because impacts like better visibility into an enterprise's operations, often very complex operations, better ability to control and to comply in sort of highly regulated industries where audit is often a concern. And one of the ones that I'm most excited about is just the class of experience benefits. And that can be experience for your customers, or depending on the industry you're in, your patients, your citizens. But it can also be experience for your employees, for your partners. And the benefits of those, while harder to quantify, often end up materializing themselves in bigger ways, right? Reduced churn, higher just general retention, word of mouth, higher net promoter scores, reduced likelihood of audit fees and compliance credits. And so those are the sorts of opportunities we make a point of emphasizing for two reasons. One, just because we know that those cacheable benefits still are going to be the ones that often get projects funded. So we don't want enterprises to forget about the other opportunities, but also because we want to encourage enterprises to really baseline and understand what good is, set that sort of vision for themselves, and then chase it by leveraging a class of automation tools that does more than simply reduce initial sort of primary costs out of their operation.
You mentioned regulated industries a couple times there, and in particular, we run into that a lot with industries that have a very strict compliance regime that they have to adhere to. And so I'm curious, which industries are you seeing that are being impacted most profoundly by the changes that automation and AI are delivering?
Right. I think it's some of the. I'd like to think it's a little bit more interesting and creative than this, but often you find the industries that are well financed and that have a real sort of imperative to change are the ones that adopt somewhat earlier. And so in our history, we've been lucky enough to develop a really robust portfolio of partners, clients in financial services and in healthcare. And so we've got a lot of banking, financial service, and insurance firms who use automation, across the board. And this is horizontal and vertical applications of it. Everything from the horizontal HR, finance, and accounting sort of processes to the more specific to their industries, like anti-money laundering, know your customer, mortgage processing and maintenance, et cetera. And then in healthcare as well. Just the security around data, both patient data and financial data, is high, and yet the dynamics of the healthcare industry are such that that's an industry that badly needs change, badly needs transformation and cost reduction. And so we've been lucky enough to work with a lot of organizations in that industry to help them understand how to better run their businesses and optimize their operations.
So can you please provide us with an example of a project you've been involved with where automation, AI, et cetera, had a profound impact on cost reduction, both cacheable and non-cacheable,
Yes.
operational efficiency, and other critical metrics?
Yeah, my pleasure. The great benefit of having done this for a while is I've got a wealth of examples to choose from. I'll pick one that I think really resonates broadly with sort of a wide audience, just because I imagine most people have been hired for a job and paid for said job. And so there was one solution we did within an HR shared services operation. Just so happens it was for a very large healthcare organization. But this HR shared services function that they had centralized had several different roles, but one of them was around what they called work absence management. And it was the basic concept of at a certain point in your career, you'll need to step away, either for disability or for maternity or paternity leave or bonding or family medical leave. There's a long list of reasons. And when you do that in the United States, there's a convention in which you get paid by multiple sources, effectively insurance and state, and you need to integrate that pay. And so they had a team that was handling and coordinating that pay integration. And ultimately, as you sort of, if you look under the hood and try to figure out the components and the complexities of the process, it's actually a massively complex process for a few reasons. One, because this was a union shop. So all of these different employees belong to different unions who have different negotiated fee structures and relationships and contracts. And then you had the different leave types, right? So you had whether it be maternity or disability or any of the others. And then you also had job grade, job type, location, tenure, salary level. And there really was this multivariate equation of parameters that needed to be calculated correctly, hopefully, to handle this pay integration. Now, the result of that was these processes took a while. They had service levels of often 2 weeks or slightly longer to complete a transaction for someone who was home on disability, to make sure that their paycheck was integrated correctly. And so that meant they had a team. The team was quite busy. It was doing a very complex role. It took quite a long time to train the people to do correctly. And retention is always a challenge in shared services environments. And so there was inherent sort of cost and friction and experience issues if the pay was either calculated slowly or incorrectly, et cetera. So that's the backdrop. And so the solution that we helped this enterprise deploy was one in which we automated a lion's share of that process, because while it was a very complex process, it was still just a lot of rules. Right, that multivariate equation was still an equation. It was rules, and so the outcome was a fewfold. One, that the pay, the time it took to transact went from 2 weeks down to approximately 2 hours, which is extraordinary in and of itself. And then there's all these sort of the secondary, tertiary benefits I referred to. If it takes not 2 weeks, but 2 hours to get your paycheck, if you're home on disability, you're not sitting there waiting and wondering where your paycheck is or wondering if it's correct. And therefore, you're not any longer calling a call center. And so the sort of secondary benefit was a fewfold. One, the call center volume went way down. The experience for employees went way up. And then if you want to carry this through as a story, the tertiary benefits were that people who were on leave had the right information, felt supported. The call center was able to be more proactive and outbound, so called you to say, is everything okay? How can we support you? It looks like you're scheduled to come back to work at this particular time. And so people came back to work on time. And so experience was higher, retention was lower. And so it was extraordinary to watch this happen. Just because you automated a core process, and SLAs the SLAs were shrunk way down, quality went way up, experience exploded, and so that was really game changing. And obviously the financial benefits of not needing as many people in that transactional team focused on that particular scope of work was compelling as well. So, long story, but one I'm really passionate about, because it really did sort of manifest itself as all sorts of different sort of blooming benefits as this thing blossomed as it went.
That's an extraordinary optimization to go from 2 weeks to 2 hours. When you mentioned now the support team had quite a bit of the call volume burden shifted off of them, I'm going to guess that freed them up to work on other more important things that probably were stacking up then. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. I call that the extra hour scenario. And what I mean by that is if you walked into any organization anywhere in the world and you said, what would you do if I gave you an extra hour in your day? I would chance a guess that no organization would say to you, you know what, we don't need it. We're pretty good. We got everything covered. You can have it back. Right. So there's every organization, the world over has those tasks that they've been meaning to get to, that they know are valuable and obvious, often create greater experience, and yet they're not able to get to them because they're just so busy keeping the lights on or the ship afloat, et cetera, hitting the SLAs and doing the necessary transactional processes. So I love those extra hour scenarios, and you're absolutely right. They had other very highly value adding things to spend their time on.
Yeah, I'm sure for everybody, there's never enough time in the day, so to get an extra hour is significant,
right? Or in this case, dozens or weeks. I mean, that's one of the ways that the industry has taken to quantifying the impact of automation is hours given back to the business.
Mm-hmm.
And partly because it's less optically it sounds better than FTE reduction, but also it gets to a greater sort of bigger, more strategic point of what are you doing for the business? How are you adding value beyond simply reducing cost?
Right. Ian, you told the BBC earlier this year that automation, quote, is an evolution of work, and the type of work we do will change. And you followed that up by saying, quote, there's an urgent need for education reform. People need to learn design thinking, creativity, analytics, programming. Should that kind of education reform take place in high school or even earlier?
That's a great question. As a father of two young girls who are in now first and third grade, I guess my opinion is somewhat slanted or informed by that. But I think that education needs to start as early as education starts. And I think we really need to, from kindergarten or preschool on up, be teaching the sort of collaborative practices, teamwork, and as you said, design and iteration, and teaching the high schoolers of the future, the employees of the future, how to be more creative, because ultimately the automation of the routine and mundane tasks will only continue, and the capability of the automation will only continue to get better, so that anything that's sort of character recognition or voice recognition or just the rule based that we spend a lot of our time helping automate won't be there anymore. And so people get to do the nuance, the judgment, the critical thinking, but we need to make sure that they're prepared to do that.
Yeah, I've heard from many quarters, as I'm sure others have, excuse me, that education is becoming a bottleneck on the path to the future, that we really need to overhaul the curriculum and really change some of the subjects that are taught from an early stage to prepare people for the future of work, which is going to be very different. I mean, if you look at just 10 years ago, a job like social media manager didn't exist, and now every company has one, or a team of them, or a contractor that provides that. And so things are going to be changing very quickly along with the technological changes, and the education sector definitely needs to keep pace with that.
Absolutely. No, and I think it's such a thrilling topic, and a somewhat scary topic sometimes to explore and discuss, but it's an imperative one. And I don't think anyone has necessarily the single silver bullet or right answer. It's going to be a collection of things. I mean, you see some of the educational programs that they have set up, for instance, in Germany, where they're training in more sort of trade skills. That sort of emphasis needs to come back too. Does everyone need to go to college? What is the future workforce going to need of us, and where won't it need us anymore? And how do we really strip the curriculum down to the fundamentals and build it back up based on that reality?
Right. Maybe instead of shop class, we should be teaching Google AdWords at the junior high and high school level going forward.
Come on, shop's a great class. I wish they had that more often.
I loved my shop classes. I was very distraught to hear that a lot of schools are cutting them out. I think it's a mistake, but if they replace them with something perhaps more relevant for the future, everybody can benefit.
I think auto maintenance, shop, how to do basic accounting, all that stuff should come back. I don't know how to do any of those things.
Ian, what is the single most important piece of advice you can offer to executive decision makers that are thinking about plunging into a digital transformation involving automation and AI and machine learning?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, I would say, again, approach this. So I'm gonna answer with a few things. You said single, but I don't do single well. First and foremost, approach this with pragmatism and a wide open aperture, because the future of work in this automation hybrid is not just pulling on the brand new. It's actually supercharging capabilities and technologies and teams that have existed in enterprises for, in some cases, decades. And I often spend a lot of time saying that there's very little new under the sun, and we really have to appreciate all of the hard work that continuous improvement teams and Six Sigma black belts have done, and enable them, rather than think that AI can magically replace them. And so that's what I spend most of my time with executives thinking through, is just how do you mesh the existing, not necessarily old, that sounds pejorative, but the existing with the new, to truly create this sort of digital operations reality for the organization. And then I guess if there's anything else, I'd just say be wary of smoke, mirrors, and hype, because I think it's sending too many people on journeys into woods that they realize too late that they've just spent a lot of time and money pinning their hopes to things that just sounded too good to be true.
All right. Well, it looks like that's all the time we have on this episode of Intelligent Automation Radio. Ian, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed our discussion, and thank you again for being our guest.
Thank you, guys. It was a thrill. Thanks for having me.
Ian Barkin, co-founder and chief strategy officer of Symphony Ventures. Thank you for listening, everyone, and remember, don't hesitate, automate. Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. We publish new shows regularly, and you won't want to miss one. And please remember to give us a rating. It helps others find the show. Intelligent Automation Radio is sponsored by Ayehu, the leader in intelligent automation solutions for IT and cybersecurity. You can get more information about Ayehu by visiting our website at ayehu.com. That's AYEHU.com. Ayehu, creating the successful path to the self-driving enterprise.